As Christmas approached, my stomach was always in knots because she was the type of baby that maybe was a little colicky and she cried every time someone held her. And, I had this thing in my head where I'm like, she's always crying. She's always so fussy. I was telling myself a lot of lies and saying, this is so embarrassing. I don't have that easygoing, happy baby. I'm making her this way. What am I doing wrong? I couldn't think straight. And my family noticed I was talking in circles a lot. Yet I was still very functional, which I'm not saying was a good thing either. I was still working. I didn't take like a quote unquote maternity leave. I was making dinner. I was cleaning. I was hitting deadlines and trying to make sure I didn't skip a beat because I also didn't want anything to feel different for Brian. And that was, in hindsight, a huge mistake. And there's a picture of me with Sienna looking at the Christmas tree. I'm holding her in my lap on Christmas Eve and can't look at that picture without remembering that moment in time of how I felt so lost, lonely, disappointed, disillusioned. And I also look at that picture now, years later, and I see how he was kneeling down right next to me, knowing, hey, this part was hard, but we're going to use this story for good because this story did change the trajectory of my life and my thoughts about how to minister to others. This hard time that I was walking through was going to strengthen me for something even more challenging that was going to come years down the road. That's the thing about the Lord. He's ahead of us already. And that's where that trust comes in, that He is going to work all things out, things that are meant for bad, things that are meant to distract us, things that are meant to defeat us. He can still work with us and work with that. This is going to be where Satan may attack you this holiday season, but it's also where God shows you His strength, where He changes your life, He shapes and He molds you. Everything at that point had been ripping apart at the seams. Me, my sanity, my marriage, my faith, you name it. I was free falling like Alice through the black hole. And on top of that, it felt like I was falling into like flames at the end. And it was just rubble all around me. But Merry Christmas anyway. That's what I was still trying to do. And I remember the ball dropping that New Year's Eve, and it was just me and Brian, and I was exhausted, and I felt like everyone in the whole world was out partying, having a great time, but me. Well, that's not true either. But again, it's just all part of the lies I was telling myself because when I went online and when I went on Instagram, that's what I saw. I saw everyone else was so functional with their infants and their babies, not skipping a beat and still going to hot yoga and still hitting all their career goals. But me, what was wrong with me? And as the ball dropped that year, I had this overwhelming sense of dread. And maybe that's where you are at this very moment. How could you possibly have a Merry Christmas or hope for the new year? And I remember around that time that I heard a short sermon on the radio about how God asked the Israelites to take the seventh day to rest. I'm not talking about the creation story. I'm talking about what was called, I should say, the seventh year. It's called the sabbatical year. They worked and worked for 6 years. And on the seventh year, he said, take a year off from the harvest and have faith that what you did in the sixth year would carry you through, to practice trusting that God has the future in His hands. In the Bible, in Leviticus, it says, the Lord said to Moses on Mount Sinai, speak to the Israelites and tell them, when you enter the land that I am giving you, let the land too keep a Sabbath for the Lord. For 6 years you may sow your field, and for 6 years prune your vineyard, gathering their produce. But the seventh year the land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, a Sabbath for the Lord, when you may neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. The aftergrowth of your harvest you shall not reap, nor shall you pick the grapes of your untrimmed vines. It shall be a year of rest for the land. And while the land has its Sabbath, all its produce will be food to eat for yourself and for your male and female slave, for your laborer and the tenant who live with you. And it struck me, that's exactly where God had placed me, in that Sabbath year. I had been going and going and going so fast and so hard on my own for so long that God was asking me to trust in Him, that everything I'd worked for prior would still be there if I took this season to tend to myself and my family.